The sky tore open without warning. A fleet of black ships rained down fire on the peaceful village nestled in the violet grasslands of Elvara. No one expected war, not here, not now. The villagers screamed and ran as the first beam scorched the earth. Among them was a young alien mother, clutching her baby close, eyes wide with panic. Her name was Solari. Her skin shimmered in soft blue under the burning sky, and her long white hair flowed like silk behind her. Her child, barely a few moons old, whimpered in her arms. Solari didn't know why they were being attacked. Her people had no weapons, no soldiers, no threats. They were healers, dreamers, and farmers. A distant roar shook the ground. Machines taller than trees marched through the forest line, tearing through homes with steel limbs. Solari stumbled, holding her child tight, as a burning structure collapsed nearby. Her legs were bleeding, but she didn't stop. She ran past bodies, past fire, past the screams of her friends. Then she saw him. A human in thick armor, dirt smeared across his face, eyes scanning the chaos. He wasn't firing like the others. He looked lost, even horrified. She stopped in front of him, trembling, lifting the child toward him. Her voice cracked through the smoke. "Take my child and run," she begged. The soldier blinked. He looked at the alien baby, then at Solari's wounds. She was bleeding badly now. More ships were landing behind her. She pushed the baby into his arms. "Please," she whispered. "She has no one. Save her." The soldier took a step back, unsure, but his arms accepted the child. "Go," Solari said, her voice urgent. "Go now." Then she turned and ran into the chaos, drawing fire away from them. He stood frozen for a second, then turned and ran the other way, holding the baby against his chest as if she were his own. He didn't know why he listened. Maybe it was the terror in her eyes. Maybe it was the tiny fingers gripping his armor. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, like he was the last hope left in a dying world. His name was Mason. He wasn't part of the invasion. He was just a scout, dropped early for navigation. He hadn't signed up to kill civilians. As he fled with the child, dodging rubble and fire, something inside him changed. The baby cried softly as explosions roared behind them. Mason found a broken tunnel under the hillside and ducked inside. The roof nearly caved in, but he shielded the child with his own body. He waited there, heart pounding, until the world grew quiet again. When morning came, the sky was ash gray. The village was gone. Only smoke and silence remained. Mason looked down at the baby in his arms. Her big eyes looked up at him, blinking slowly. She didn't cry. She just looked at him and reached for his beard. He sighed. He didn't know what to do next, but he knew he couldn't leave her here. He wrapped her tighter and began walking toward the nearest mountain path. He didn't look back. She had no name, no home, no family, just a human who once came from the stars and chose to save her instead of leaving her behind. Mason had never raised a child before, especially not an alien one. But as he climbed the steep paths into the fog-covered mountains, he held the infant close and whispered promises he didn't understand. The baby didn't cry anymore. She only watched him with curious eyes, glowing softly in the cold morning light. Her skin shimmered faintly, a soft blue glow that made her look like a tiny star in his arms. He found an old watchtower high in the cliffs. It had been abandoned long ago, but the walls still stood strong. He cleared out the dust, sealed the broken windows, and built a fire from branches. This would be their home for now. Mason laid the child on a soft bed of cloth, made from his torn uniform, and dried leaves. He scavenged for food every day, roots, berries, whatever the scanners marked safe. He boiled water and crushed food into paste for her. She ate quietly, always watching him. He named her Nara. It meant hope in a dead earth language his grandmother once spoke. She was the only good thing left from the nightmare that destroyed Elvara. Every night, Mason sat by the fire, holding her in his arms. He spoke to her about stars, about Earth, about mistakes he'd made. She didn't understand the words, but she listened. Her tiny hand always rested on his chest as he spoke. He taught her how to crawl, how to walk, how to laugh. When she fell, she didn't cry. She simply got up and tried again. She was strong, just like her mother had been. In the quiet mountain days, he carved toys from wood. Little animals, starships, and stones with painted faces. He didn't know much about children, but he did his best. Nara laughed when he made funny noises and clapped her hands when he sang old songs. But it wasn't all peaceful. Some nights, the sky burned again. Search ships passed overhead, scanning for survivors. Mason would hide with Nara in the cellar below the tower. He covered her mouth gently and whispered, "Quiet now," as the lights passed over the rocks. Knew they were hunting him. A human soldier who went missing during a classified operation. But he also knew they would take her if they found her. He couldn't allow that. One afternoon, he spotted a patrol drone near the edge of the ridge. He packed supplies, gathered Nara on his back, and moved deeper into the valley. They found a hidden cave behind a waterfall. It was cold, but dry and safe. He sealed the entrance with branches and moss. Time passed slowly. Nara grew taller. Her voice started to form words first in her native tongue, then slowly in his. "Papa," she called him one morning as she ran to him with a leaf in her hand. He froze when he heard it. He didn't know how to respond, so he just smiled and picked her up. She giggled and touched his beard, then gave him the leaf as if it were treasure. Mason built a garden near the cave, using seeds from broken ration kits. He taught Nara how to water the plants and pick berries safely. She loved the bright colors and soft petals. She would sing to the plants, and Mason swore. They grew faster when she did. Though far from cities and technology, Mason had never felt more human. Raising Nara gave him purpose. She wasn't just a mission or a memory, she was family. But peace never lasted forever. One morning, he woke to find strange footprints near the stream, not his. Not Nara's bigger. He followed the trail, hand on his old pulse rifle, heart pounding in his chest. They led to a rock pile, then vanished. No scent, no broken branches. Whoever it was knew how to move like a ghost. Mason returned to the cave in silence, scanning the sky that night for signs of trouble. He didn't tell Nara. She was still too young. But that night, he didn't sleep. He sat near the cave entrance with his rifle across his knees, watching the shadows move under the moonlight, and far above, unseen by both of them, a hidden probe transmitted its signal to a ship drifting beyond the clouds. A message had been received. She was alive. And someone was coming. Mason sharpened his blade in silence. His eyes stayed locked on the cave entrance, even as the sparks from the stone danced across the floor. He hadn't seen the intruder, but the tracks were real. Someone was out there. Watching them, Nara played. Nearby, stacking rocks into towers. She giggled as they fell and built them again. She was unaware of the quiet danger creeping toward their hidden home. Mason kept a smile on his face for her, but his hand never strayed far from his rifle. Each day, he explored a little farther. He left Nara sleeping and crept through the woods, checking traps, brushing over tracks, searching for clues. Something wasn't right. Animals had grown silent. Birds no longer chirped near the stream. Even the wind seemed to whisper warnings. Then one night, Nara woke screaming. Mason rushed to her side, holding her tightly. "Bad dream," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The fire is coming again." Mason rocked her gently, brushing her hair back. "Just a dream," he whispered, but his heart beat faster. The next morning, smoke curled in the distance. Thin and faint, but real. Mason climbed the high ridge to see better. In the far valley below, black shapes moved ships, soldiers, machines. They were here, and they were close. He didn't wait. He returned to the cave, grabbed what supplies he could carry, and wrapped Nara in a thick coat. "We're going for a long walk," he said. She didn't ask why. She only held his hand and followed. For days they moved through the wilderness, sleeping under trees and hiding from drones. Mason avoided open spaces. He knew how they searched. He had once been one of them. Now he was the hunted. They crossed cold rivers and climbed rocky cliffs. Nara stayed strong, never complaining, though her feet ached and her eyes grew heavy. Mason carried her when she stumbled. He whispered to her each night that everything would be okay, even if he wasn't sure it was true. Eventually, they reached the edge of the forest. Before them lay an old temple, carved into the face of a cliff. Vines draped over its pillars, and moss covered its stones. But it stood solid, safe, forgotten by time. They entered cautiously. Inside, the air was cool and dry. Mason found a room with stone walls and a small pool of clean water. He set down his gear and let Nara rest. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to breathe, but they were not alone. Deep within the temple, sensors blinked to life. Silent watchers awakened, reading the girl's energy signature. Alien systems hummed softly, speaking in codes lost to the galaxy. And far above, someone responded to the signal. Back in the stone chamber, Mason watched Nara sleep. Her head rested on a folded coat, her hands curled near her face. She looked peaceful. He leaned against the wall, exhausted, listening to the water drip into the pool. Then he heard a whisper. Not from Nara, from behind the wall. He grabbed his rifle and stood quietly. The wall shimmered. A hidden door opened, light spilling out. And from the light stepped someone he never thought he'd see again. It was her, Solari, the alien mother he believed had died that day. Her face was thinner, her skin dimmer, but her eyes were the same. She stared at him without blinking. Her gaze shifted to the child sleeping behind him. She stepped forward. Mason raised his hand slowly, not in threat, but in shock. "How?" he asked, but the words barely came. Solari did not answer. She walked past him, kneeling beside Nara. Tears rolled down her glowing cheeks as she touched the girl's hand. Nara stirred and opened her eyes. She looked at the woman beside her. There was no fear, only curiosity. Then she smiled and said softly, "Mama," without knowing why. Solari gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. She looked up at Mason. Her lips trembled. "You raised her," she whispered. "You kept her safe." Mason nodded slowly. "I promised you I would," he replied. The temple light faded as the door sealed behind her. Mason stepped back, letting mother and daughter share their moment. His heart felt heavy and light all at once. He had done what he came to do. But something inside him whispered this wasn't the end. In the silence of the ancient temple, a family, long broken, had begun to mend again. Solari sat beside her daughter, brushing strands of white hair from Nara's sleeping face. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from wonder. A year had passed since she handed her baby to a stranger. Now she sat beside that same child, alive and safe. Mason leaned against the stone pillar, arms crossed, watching quietly. He had imagined this moment many times, though never like this. He thought she was dead, burned, lost, yet here she was, breathing, crying, and whispering soft songs in a language Nara barely remembered. "How did you survive?" Mason finally asked. His voice echoed softly in the ancient room. Solari looked up at him, her eyes heavy with memory. "A rebel ship found me," she said, "barely alive. I spent months in a medical chamber. They thought I was a waste of resources, but one commander believed I might still have something to live for." She paused, her hand still gently resting on Nara's arm. "I begged them to help me find her, but the signals were weak. We only found this place because of the old temple's beacon. It was once a sacred shelter for my people. Mason stepped closer. You had no way of knowing she was alive, he said. Solari nodded slowly. I didn't, but something inside me refused to stop searching. Nara stirred again. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking at the two faces above her. Papa, she said first, reaching out toward Mason. Then her gaze turned to Solari. You came back, she whispered, though she didn't understand why she said it. Solari smiled through tears and leaned down, pressing her forehead gently to Nara's. I never stopped loving you, she said, her voice shaking. Mason turned away for a moment, giving them space. He looked out through the cracks in the stone walls. The jungle beyond was still. No sound of ships. No flashing lights. But he knew peace like this never lasted long. By midday, the three of them sat around a small fire in the center of the chamber. Solari ate quietly, her eyes still flicking between Nara and Mason. You raised her well, she said. She's strong. She speaks both our tongues. Mason nodded. She listens, learns fast. Reminds me of someone else I met under fire. Solari smiled at that. I always knew she'd be a fighter, but behind the smiles, Mason saw the worry in Solari's eyes. She had returned, yes, but what now? Could they stay hidden forever? Could Nara have a life outside of shadows and caves? He didn't have those answers. That night, they took turns keeping watch. Solari sat beside the door, her weapon ready, her ears alert to the wind. Mason slept with one arm over Nara, still half awake. He trusted Solari, but old habits never truly faded. Just before dawn, Solari shook him awake. I heard something, she said softly. Mason rose silently, grabbing his rifle. They both moved outside, keeping low, eyes scanning the brush. There it was, a flash of light. A shadow moved between the trees, not animal, too quiet, too straight. Mason raised his scope and spotted the shape of a scout drone. Small, fast, but deadly. It scanned the air, then moved on. They found the signal, Mason muttered. Solari's face went pale. They'll be here within the day. They returned inside. Nara sat up, rubbing her eyes. Is it morning? She asked. Mason knelt beside her. Not yet, he said. But we have to leave soon. Solari knelt on the other side. Nara, do you trust us? The girl nodded without hesitation. Always. By noon, they packed what little they had and left the temple. Solari led them through a narrow passage behind the cliffs. It twisted downward into the roots of the mountain, an old escape path used by ancient guardians of the temple. They moved quietly, their footsteps muffled by moss and old dust. Nara held Mason's hand while Solari walked ahead, checking every corner. The path opened into a glowing cavern filled with crystal light. A hidden transport chamber lay buried beneath the rock. Solari touched a panel. The crystals responded with a soft hum. This was used to send supplies to mountain colonies. It still works. It will take us far north, beyond their scanners. Mason stared at the platform. And after that, he asked, where do we go? Solari turned to him, her eyes clear and firm. We make a new life. Together. He looked at her, then at Nara. She smiled up at both of them. Together, she repeated, like it was the only word she needed. They stepped onto the platform. The light pulsed. The stone around them melted into motion, and in a blink, they were gone. The transport platform stopped deep beneath the northern cliffs. A soft hiss echoed through the chamber as the old doors opened to reveal a world untouched by war. The cave led to a valley carved by ancient rivers, hidden by walls of stone and mist. Mason stepped out first, scanning the area with cautious eyes. Solari followed, holding Nara close as the wind rushed gently over the rocks. It was colder here, but peaceful. There were no machines, no drones. Just sky, stone, and silence. They built a new camp near the edge of a river. Mason used strong branches and scavenged metal to craft a small shelter. Solari gathered food from glowing berry bushes and taught Nara how to find roots that would not make her sick. Days passed. The threat from the south faded into memory, but Mason did not lower his guard. He checked the sky each morning and sharpened his tools at night. Solari noticed but said nothing. She knew that safety was always a fragile thing. Nara laughed more now. She ran across the fields chasing light bugs. She helped Solari mix herbs into food and copied Mason as he repaired broken equipment. She had grown stronger, braver, and wiser than her years. One evening, they sat around a small fire. Nara leaned on Solari's shoulder, sleepy from the day's adventures. Mason stared into the flames. "This can't last forever," he said quietly. "They'll come again." "They always do," Solari nodded. "But we won't run next time," she said. "We'll fight if we must." For her, Mason looked at Nara, who was now softly snoring. He smiled. "For her," he repeated. The next morning, Solari led Mason to a ridge overlooking the valley. There, half buried under vines and moss, was an old communication tower. "My people built these across the continent," she said. "For messages, warnings, hope." Mason examined the tower. It was broken, but not beyond repair. With the right tools, they could use it again. "We could warn others," he said. "Maybe find more survivors." Solari placed a hand on his arm. "And maybe call down fire," she said. "We must be careful. A signal can bring friends or death." Together, they began repairs. Mason rewired broken panels while Solari reactivated the ancient power cells using light energy stored in her skin. Days turned into weeks. Nara watched from the rocks above, playing with carved toys Mason made in the evenings. One day, a voice crackled through the static. Not human, not Elveran, something cold and calculated. Mason froze, hand over the panel. The voice repeated a sequence. "Coordinates." He looked at Solari. "They know someone's alive," he said. Solari powered down the tower. "We stop now," she said. "No more signals. We stay quiet. We protect her." But it was too late. Far above the clouds, a satellite blinked. It sent a pulse across the stars. A ship turned. A destination was locked. That night, the wind howled through the valley. The fire danced wild and restless. Nara had another dream. She woke crying, whispering, "The sky is falling." Mason held her close. He looked up through the cracks in the roof and saw nothing yet. But he knew the child's dreams had never been wrong. Solari gathered their supplies in silence. They didn't speak of running. They didn't speak of fear. They only moved, prepared, and waited. They had built a home, and now they would defend it. By morning, the wind had gone still. Birds did not sing. The river flowed quiet and dark. Mason stood on the ridge, rifle in hand, scanning the sky. Solari stood below with Nara wrapped in her arms. They were ready. Then a shadow moved through the clouds, not large, not loud. A single craft, sleek and black, with silver wings that cut the sky. It hovered above the ridge, silent, watching. Mason raised his weapon but did not fire. Solari called out, her voice strong. "Who comes? Declare yourself." The ship did not respond. Instead, it opened its side slowly. A light shined down, warm and steady. From it, a figure stepped out, tall, cloaked, carrying no weapons. Mason narrowed his eyes. "Stay with her," he told Solari. Then he climbed the ridge, rifle at his side. The figure waited at the edge of the light. When Mason approached, the cloak fell back, revealing a face part human, part machine. The stranger bowed. "I came for the child," he said calmly, "not to harm her, but to learn why she still lives when all others do not." Mason did not lower his weapon. "You'll have to go through me." The stranger smiled, but it wasn't cruel. "I expected nothing less." Mason stood firm on the ridge. The stranger's cloak rustled in the mountain wind, but the man beneath it did not move. The human soldier kept his weapon ready, eyes locked on the half-machine visitor. "I don't care who you are," Mason said. "She's not going anywhere with you." The stranger held out empty hands. "My name is Rel. I am a watcher, a seeker of truths. I came alone. I have no weapons. I only ask questions." "Then ask from there," Mason said sharply. Rel gave a slow nod. "The girl is Elverin, but her energy is unlike the others. She survived when no other child did. The Empire wants to know why. They fear what they do not understand." Mason stepped closer, his voice low and tense. "You tell your Empire nothing. She is not a question to answer. She is a child." "She is my daughter." Rel tilted his head. "And yet she is also more. My sensors detect something ancient within her. A light that should not burn in one so young. You've seen it, haven't you?" Mason thought of Nara's voice calming storms. Her dreams that warned of danger. Her laughter that made flowers bloom early. He said nothing, but his silence spoke enough. Behind him, Solari climbed the ridge with Nara in her arms. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Rel, but she held her ground. "If you came to hurt her, you will not leave this valley." Rel turned to her and bowed. "Priestess of Elvara, you were lost in the flames. The Empire believed you dead. I should be," she replied, "but I lived." For her, Nara looked at Rel with quiet eyes. She didn't seem afraid. Instead, she reached out a small hand. "Are you cold?" she asked gently. Rel looked stunned. He knelt down slowly, placing one metallic hand near hers without touching. "You feel warmth from me?" Nara nodded. "You're sad." Rel lowered his head. "Yes, I am." Solari stepped closer. "Then leave here in peace. Do not let your sadness cause more pain." Rel stood slowly. "If I return without answers, they will send others. Stronger, less kind. They will burn the valley." Mason looked at Solari. "Then we show him," she nodded. Together, they brought Rel down to their home. They showed him the garden Nara helped grow. They let him watch her speak to birds and hum to the river. They did not hide her laughter, her questions, or her strange glow under moonlight. For 2 days, Rel stayed. He did not take notes or scan her with machines. He simply watched. He spoke gently. He even smiled once, when Nara gave him a carved toy shaped like his ship. At the end of the second night, Rel sat by the fire while Nara slept in Solari's arms. "I have seen enough," he said. "And I understand." Mason studied him carefully. "Understand what?" "That your species," Rel replied, "and hers were never meant to be enemies. But something in her joins the best of both. She's the start of something new." Solari tightened her arms around Nara, then let her live in peace. "That is all we ask." Rel stood. "I will say she was not found. That the signal was false. If they come again, it will not be because of me." Mason rose with him. "Why the change of heart?" Rel looked toward the stars. "Because a child offered me kindness. And in that moment, I felt alive." He walked back to his ship. The light returned. The hatch opened. But before stepping inside, Rel turned and bowed deeply. "Protect her well. She will change more than just this world." Then he vanished into the sky. The valley returned to silence. Mason, Solari, and Nara watched the stars until the last light was gone. Then they went back to their fire, holding hands, saying nothing. But they all knew the peace was only borrowed. The true storm was still waiting, and they would face it together. The seasons changed slowly in the hidden valley. Rain came softly, washing over the rocks and feeding the plants Mason and Solari had carefully grown. Nara's laughter filled the air like music, and for a time, they allowed themselves to believe they were truly safe. She had grown taller. Her steps were steady, her voice clearer. She spoke in 2 languages now and sang in both. She asked many questions, especially about the stars. "Can I visit them someday?" she often asked. Mason always smiled. "One day, maybe," he answered. Solari taught her ancient Elveran songs and how to draw the sacred patterns in the soil. Mason taught her how to make fire, fix broken tools, and track animals in the woods. She learned fast, sometimes too fast. One night, while they were gathering water, Nara placed her hands on a fallen tree. A moment later, green vines began to grow from its bark. Mason stepped back in awe. Solari dropped the basket she carried and stared at her. Daughter with wide eyes, "You healed it," Mason whispered. Nara looked up confused. "I just wanted it to be better," she said. It was sad. Solari knelt beside the tree and touched the new leaves. "This is not normal. Even among my people, no child could do this. She's not only gifted, she's awakened." Mason rubbed the back of his neck. "That means they'll come for her again, doesn't it?" Solari nodded. "The Empire fears what it cannot control. If they learn what she can do, they won't just come with soldiers. They'll come with science, chains, and fear." The next morning, Mason climbed to the tallest rock above the valley. He adjusted the old telescope Rel had left behind. In the distance, just beyond the blue peaks, 3 black dots hovered. In the clouds, ships. He returned to camp quickly. "They're here," he said. "Scouts. Maybe more behind them." Solari looked toward the sky with a calm face. "We don't run anymore." Mason looked at her, then at Nara, who stood by the fire with a worried frown. "No," he said. "We don't, but we prepare." For the next 2 days they worked silently. Mason reinforced the cave entrances. Solari activated old defenses hidden beneath the garden stones. Nara helped where she could, always asking what each thing did and why they needed it. On the 3rd morning, the ships came into view, sleek, black, silent. They floated above the valley like sharks above the reef. No weapons fired, no voice spoke. They only waited. Mason stood near the fire, his rifle slung across his chest. Solari stood beside him, her hand gently resting on Nara's shoulder. "Whatever happens," Mason said softly, "you stay behind us." The ships opened. A single figure descended, not armored, not armed. Clad in white, a face neither human nor Elveran, something in between. Its skin shimmered like glass, and its voice echoed without sound. "We seek the child," it said. "We offer no harm, only understanding." Solari stepped forward. "You want to understand her by taking her from her home, from her parents?" "We want to understand how she exists," it replied. "Her power could bring balance, or destruction. Left unguided, she could tear the stars apart." Mason narrowed his eyes. "Or she could heal what your empires broke." The being tilted its head. "Perhaps, but not without guidance. Not without knowledge." Nara stepped forward. "I don't want to go with you," she said. "My family is here." The being looked at her. "You are a bridge between worlds. You do not belong to one. You belong to all." Solari reached out, gently pulling Nara back. "She belongs where she is loved. That is enough." The sky began to pulse. A signal flared from the ships. The being looked up, then back down. "The others do not agree. If I do not bring her, they will come. They will take." Mason stepped forward. "Then tell them this. She has parents. She has a life. And if they try to take her, they will face us both." The being stared at him. "You would die for her?" Mason's voice did not shake. "I already chose to live for her." "That's stronger." For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the being raised a hand and sent a silent signal to the ships. The lights dimmed. The engines hummed down. Slowly, one by one, they turned away. The figure looked back once more. "If she ever wishes to learn who she is beyond this place, the stars will welcome her. Until then, May your valley remain untouched." Then it vanished in a flicker of light, leaving the valley in silence once more. The ships were gone, but the sky still shimmered with their fading trails. Mason stood silently on the ridge, watching the light vanish behind the mountain peaks. The valley was quiet again, but a new kind of silence had settled in his chest. He returned to the camp where Solari was boiling water and Nara played with smooth stones near the fire. Nara looked up first, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Are they gone?" she asked. Mason nodded and sat beside her. "They won't come back," he said. "At least not for a while." Solari stirred the pot gently. "They'll always want what they fear." But she gave them something today. A choice. She stood on her own feet and said no. "That matters." Mason looked at Nara. "Do you know what you did?" She nodded. "I stayed." That night they ate together beneath the stars. The fire flickered as the wind carried the scent of herbs across the valley. Nara leaned into Mason's side and whispered, "Tell me about Earth again." Mason smiled and began. He spoke of oceans that roared like thunder, of trees taller than towers, of old cities and quiet lakes. Solari added stories of her people gardens, made from singing crystals, skies that changed color with feeling, rivers that glowed at night. Nara listened to both. Her eyes stayed fixed on the stars, as if she was trying to imagine all the worlds her parents once knew. In the days that followed, they worked without fear. Mason built stronger walls for their shelter. Solari planted a new section of garden for healing herbs. Nara helped dig and water, her hands always warm against the soil. She didn't speak often of the figure in white, but she often paused when looking at the stars. Sometimes she would hum the same quiet melody she had heard when the visitor first spoke. It was not a sad sound. It was curious. One evening, Mason found her sitting at the edge of the river, drawing shapes into the mud. "What are those?" he asked. "Maps," she replied, "of places I want to see one day." He sat beside her and looked at the winding lines and dots she had drawn. "Will you go?" he asked gently. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Not yet. I still have things to learn here." Solari joined them with a woven blanket. They watched the stars rise together, their reflections dancing in the dark water. The warmth between them needed no words. Weeks turned to months. The valley bloomed under their care. Birds returned. Strange flowers opened under Nara's fingers. The trees grew faster where she walked. Even the wind seemed to hum with quiet joy. One morning, a new tree stood at the edge of the camp. Tall and silver-barked, with leaves that shimmered blue and gold. Mason didn't remember planting it. Solari touched its trunk and whispered. She dreamed it into being. Nara walked up beside them, barefoot, smiling. "I thought it would. Look nice here." They laughed together. That tree became the heart of the valley, a place where they met each morning. A place where Nara sat and read the old texts Solari taught her. A place where Mason hung wind chimes made from scrap metal and memory. One night, lightning flashed in the far distance, but it did not come closer. Nara stood under the tree and raised her hands. The storm faded before it reached them. Solari watched in silence. Mason stepped beside her and whispered, "She's something new." Solari nodded. "She's what we should have been, if we hadn't broken everything." As time passed, stories of the girl in the valley spread beyond the stars. Some said she was a myth. Others believed she was the key to healing broken worlds. But none could find the valley again. It remained hidden, guarded by trees that whispered and rivers that warned. Inside that unseen world, Nara grew into a woman. She did not fear. She learned from the soil, from the stars, and from the love of the two souls who had chosen her over war. One day, she stood at the ridge with a pack on her back. "I think I'm ready to go," she said. Solari hugged her tightly. Mason placed his hand on her shoulder. "Then go," he said. "And take this light with you." Nara walked into the wind, her feet soft on the earth. The valley behind her did not mourn, it waited, for one day she would return. But now the stars were calling her by name.